and kind of our guiding question. Or actually, well, let's take a look at the objectives. First, we're going to analyze the outcome of the American Revolution. What did we get? What did we achieve? What happens as a result of the revolution? And we need to evaluate the impact of the revolution on the Persia spectrum. The revolution and its impact on politics and governance, on economics, on religion, on society, on the way we think, and even on our art and our culture. So the guiding question that we're going to have today is that just too bright? Look at that. Is that just too high, everybody? Is that just too bright?
Yeah, I think the background is just the bright part and it blurs out the rest of the words.
Okay, well let me see what happens if I turn on the light here. That may help. All right, it helps a little bit. Okay. So the guiding question, and this was actually a free response question a couple of years ago, did the American Revolution fulfill expectations for freedom and equality? People came out of the revolution expecting certain things, expecting political things, economic things, social things. Did the aftermath meet those expectations or fall short? I mean, if you take a look at the Treaty of Paris, America gets a lot of stuff. Britain is extraordinarily lenient on America. Do you ever wonder, though, why Britain was so good to America in the Treaty of Paris? Yeah.
They still wanted resources, so like trade-wise?
Well, I mean, they're definitely interested in trade with the Americans, but it goes to the heart of who the British hate more than the Americans. The French. What the British did was they undercut the American-French alliance by negotiating with the Americans separately and keeping the French out. Because both the Americans and the British knew that the French were actually interested in keeping America bottled up here on the East Coast, and France wanted to get all that land back. So the Americans knowing that, the British knowing that, the British and Americans decided to make a deal that benefited the Americans instead of the French. So it was great, and it's great diplomatic statecraft. The guys who negotiated this treaty, and the head of the delegation negotiating the Treaty of Paris was Benjamin Franklin. Brilliant diplomat. Knew how to work the British, knew how to work the French. So, and I mean, not that this means anything, but it really does help you understand why America got such a great deal. The American Revolution it turned into a world war for Britain, and so Britain wound up losing lots of money and lots of men and all this stuff, and it became extraordinarily unpopular in Great Britain, so much so that the conservative Tory government was ousted, and the Whigs took control of Parliament in 1781, just in time for the end of the American Revolution. And it was the Whigs in Parliament who found common cause with the Americans, and that's another reason why Americans got such a good deal. As a matter of fact, the British looked at the deal that the Americans got and voted the Whigs out of office the following year. So the Whigs were only in office for like 2 years. But it was the 2 years that we needed them to be there for us to score a good deal. So fate was smiling on us. The Loyalists, the Americans who had remained loyal to the British crown, mainly your people tied to the Anglican Church, mainly people with business dealings in England that, their wealth was dependent on trade with England. Those people during the war had their property confiscated, had their businesses destroyed, had a lot of their wealth taken away, and Britain had told the Americans that they needed to pay those loyalists back. And of course, the Americans ignored it. And so a lot of loyalists who had lived here in America during the American Revolution and really suffered through the American Revolution, many of those loyalists moved away to Britain, to Canada. All right, nation in America after the American Revolution. They've just gotten done throwing off a king, throwing off what they considered to be an oppressive parliament. What is the political expectation, John? Equality for citizens. Everybody's on an equal ground. Exactly. That is definitely a big expectation. Yeah. It'll be what? A weak central government. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, there is this sense of renewal, of starting from ground zero, and that since everybody's got an equal shot, maybe everybody will have an opportunity to be successful. I mean, that kind of bleeds into the economic realm, but it's this idea of equality. That's in the mindset at the end of the American Revolution. Is this from last year's Vera Bradley collection? It's from this year's? Where did we get it? South Moon Under? Or yes.
I think there's maybe like a strong aversion to taxes by the colonists, so when the government needs money, everyone's gonna throw like a hissy fit like.
That is correct. You are absolutely correct. There is an emphasis, and you guys hit on all of it. There is an emphasis on equality. There is an emphasis on decentralized government, weak central government. There is an emphasis on opportunity, and there is this aversion to taxes and oppressive government that people are going to rail against. That is the political reality at the end of the American Revolution. And does that work? Why?
The government needs money to be able to have any authority to do anything.
The government needs money to have authority to do anything. And if you have a weak centralized government, what do you wind up having? If you don't have a national government that's able to run roughshod over the 13 states, what have you got?
Pretty much like 13
You've got 13 different countries doing 13 different things with 13 different sets of laws. You've got trade wars that are going on between Maryland and Pennsylvania where they're charging tariffs across state lines. How is anybody going to invest in that kind of political anarchy? People do not invest where there is chaos. And you need to have political stability and order before you can have economic success. And at the end of the American Revolution, you do not have that stability. You've got freedom, but you don't have stability. And you need stability for success. But the idea was that that everyone was equal. Now they start to couch it. Everyone white was equal. Okay? And no better than anyone else, Americans could trust in the goodness and honesty of citizens. They believed that John Locke idea that man was created good, that everybody was good and virtuous, and that if we just promoted that goodness and virtuousness, we wouldn't need a strong government because everybody would do the right thing. You could count on Americans doing the right thing. And so limited government was encouraged. You didn't need a strong government. Everybody's looking out for everybody else. It's what's called the virtuous republic. And just because you guys need to learn Latin, vert, verite, means honesty. So when you see the word virtuous, people who are honest, people who are good. The more Latin, the more Greek you know, the more big words you'll know. So this was the belief. And guys, who was going to be the citizen who would be the backbone of this American experiment in virtuousness? Who would be the person you could count on to be the concerned citizen and the person who participated in politics and made everything work? Who would we look to? The wealthy elites? The poor yeoman farmer? No. What you're looking at is the landowning farmer. That the small farmer, the person who owned a plot of land, had something to gain, had something to lose, that they would make wise decisions for the country because they stood the most to gain or lose. They wouldn't do something that would hurt the country in general because they would lose out. They would make wise decisions that would benefit everybody. And so the idea of the independent farmer as the backbone of American society. Venerate the plow. That is the title of this woodcut. But it means honor the farmer. Honor the farmer. They are the backbone of American society. Not the banker, not the merchant, not the lawyer. The farmer. So this idea of an agrarian, egalitarian meaning equal, utopia. Very pie in the sky. Very dreamy. That you could count on this farmer to make wise and good decisions. And this is all couched under the philosophy of republicanism. So there is this embracing of the idea of republicanism. Republicanism, small r, not Lincoln, not Reagan, not Nixon. Small r republicanism as a governing philosophy. That the power to govern comes from the people, the small farmer. Independent property owners, small farmers. You can count on the goodness of men, the removal of aristocracy and elitism and promotion of egalitarianism or equality. You guys hit on it all. I'm just putting it in better vocabulary for you. Virtue, equality, egalitarianism, the small farmer. Those are key ideas right there. Power comes from the people. And so, at its core, American expectations are that government should be limited. Limited government. Let people do what they're doing. Stay out of their way. I mean, doesn't it sound like a political philosophy today? I mean, don't you hear people talking about that today? That government should be limited, that it should, that the extension of government should be rolled back. I mean, that philosophy's still around today. Now, is just taking this out to its furthest extent, is this going to remain the political reality? Why? Now, and you're right. No, it does not remain the political reality. But why? Why doesn't this work? Yeah. Okay, first of all, the government doesn't have enough power to enforce anything, which means you've got everybody out there doing their own thing. What is the danger in believing that everyone is equal? Kramer. take advantage of other people. I mean, that's just human nature. How can I get an edge? How can I get an advantage? You really can't count on that civic virtue. And if everybody believes that they're equal,
they're not going to listen to anyone else.
they're not going to listen to anybody else. Why do I have to listen to you? I'm equal with you. I'll do it. Essentially, whatever, I'll do what I want. And so, if you actually take this philosophy, which on the surface looks really great at the end of the American Revolution, but if you play that political reality out, it doesn't work. And it just allow me to skip ahead. Okay, here you go. So here's the problem. Here's the problem with the political reality. You've got the average Joe believing that they're a modern-day George Washington. You've got everybody and their uncle believing that they can rise up against the government and fight back against any taxes or any rules or any regulations. You've got what John Adams called mob rule or mobocracy. Yeah.
My favorite phrase we learned in AP World probably would have been the egalitarian disease, where if government gave way to like one thing, then all of a sudden, considering everyone's all, I need more people, then it was just more and more and more.
Right. So you've got people like Daniel Shays out in Western Massachusetts who believes he's a modern-day George Washington, can rally an army of Massachusetts farmers against the banking and government interest in Massachusetts, and you've got a full-fledged rebellion on their hands, and Shays just says, well, I'm just doing what George Washington did because George Washington's no better than me. So what's to stop a rebellion from occurring every week if everybody believes that they're equal? Can too much democracy lead to instability? Yes, it does. You wind up having these rebellions all over the place. The most noteworthy being Shays' rebellion in Western Massachusetts in 1786. And by the way, notice it's not Shay apostrophe S. The man's name wasn't Daniel Shay. It was Daniel Shays. So it's S apostrophe. I mean, Shay's rebellion in 1786 is a wake-up call. It's like a clarion call that this egalitarian, virtuous republic, weak centralized government ain't working, and that something new needs to be tried. What does Shay's rebellion lead to? How do you get a stronger national government? September 17th, we celebrate it every year. Constitution. The Constitutional Convention is derived from the panic of elite people about Shay's rebellion. And by the way, that's always a test question. Shay's rebellion leads to the Constitutional Convention. Aftermath of Shay's rebellion convinces the elites in America, the wealthy, the merchant class, that there needs to be more stability and less equality. And if you look at the Constitution, it is not a document that promotes equality and democracy. It promotes control and stability. I know I'm skipping out of order on my notes here, but I figured I'd take the whole political thing out to its conclusion. Because if you look at the political reality after the American Revolution, what is the government under which America operates? Yeah, I know, but what's it called?
Articles of Confederation.
The Articles of Confederation, which is what they call a firm league of friendship. But let's be honest, It's 13 different states doing 13 different things. Loyalties are more local than national. People call themselves Virginians and Marylanders and Pennsylvanians rather than Americans. When Thomas Jefferson says, I can't wait to go back to my country, he's referring to Virginia. So you've got 13 individual states doing their own thing, and everybody's on a separate page. About the only thing that the Articles Congress has the power to do together is foreign policy. Everything else, the states have that power. One of the big bones of contention when the Articles of Confederation was ratified was all that land out west of the Appalachian Mountains. Who was going to get that? That debate over that land had to be settled before the Articles government was put in place. Yeah.
I was gonna say the land ordinances.
And that's where the land ordinance and the Northwest Ordinance come from, because that's the answer to the question, who gets the land out west? And really, the Articles government does not have much to show for it. About the only thing the Articles government does have to show for it is the land ordinance and the Northwest Ordinance. If I were you, I would start learning how to abbreviate. Good note-taking skills. Learn how to abbreviate. You don't have to write lead to, you can write an arrow. This led to that. Loyalties were more local than national. Learn to abbreviate. Okay. So, you have weak state governments as well. That was the expectation. At the end of the American Revolution, the political expectation was that there would be limited government at the national level and at the state level. So you had weak central governments in the states. Now, the strongest branch of government in these states was the legislatures, because they represented the will of the people. So they invested a great deal of power in the legislatures. But here's the problem with legislatures. They're made up of men with opinions. And sometimes those opinions don't jive. Just take a look at Congress right now. That's made up of 435 guys that can't get out of their own way. And 100 senators that can't get out of their own way. So you had weak executives, governors, weak governors, because they were seen as king-like. Americans didn't want to replace one strong executive with another strong executive. And by the way, executive, the word execute is in there. They're the ones who execute the laws. The legislatures legislate the laws. They make the laws. The executives execute the laws and make sure the laws are followed. In these states, voting rights were limited to white landowners. You had to be white and you had to own land because you had a stake in the success of the state. But the inability to govern these states during crisis led to states rethinking their governments. And so state governments started to experiment with changing their constitutions. And a number of states changed their constitutions to create strong executives. Another thing that states did was they started moving their capitals west. Why? Just think about Pennsylvania. The capital was Philadelphia. They moved the capital to Harrisburg. Why? Oh, definitely has to do with Western expansion. Absolutely has to do with Western expansion. Yeah.
Make sure the frontier people are following the laws.
Exactly. It's to make sure the frontier people, who generally tend to be rebellious, a la the Paxton Boys in Western Pennsylvania, it's to make sure that the frontier people are following the law. So, state capitals move. Philadelphia becomes Harrisburg. What was it? Williamsburg. Williamsburg or Jamestown? It was Williamsburg. Williamsburg becomes Richmond. New Bern becomes Raleigh. Charleston becomes Columbia. New York City becomes Albany. You start moving those capitals inland to be closer to those frontier people and make sure they're following the rules, because they tended to be sources of instability. And strong governors. What kind of powers did these governors have in these states? They had the power to veto laws. They had the power to command the militia. So they have the power to veto and the power to command the military. Does that sound familiar? I mean, where do you think people got the idea for a president of the United States anyway? They didn't just make it up out of whole cloth. They did it based on what the states were doing. As a matter of fact, your president of the United States is modeled after the governor of Massachusetts. And who wrote the Constitution for Massachusetts to create a strong governor with the power to command the military and veto legislation to control the will of democracy? John Adams. So states start tinkering with their constitutions. The Articles government, and guys, look, you already know that the Articles government is weak. So you can say has no power to tax, print money, regulate, enforce, pass, okay? So you can put that down. I mean, you can find a shortcut to writing all that down. But the Articles government doesn't have the power to tax. It doesn't have the power to print money. So economically, you've got 13 different currencies. Yeah. Congress had no power to regulate interstate trade. So if trade crossed the line from Maryland to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania could charge Maryland tariffs if they wanted to. And Congress couldn't do anything about it. And Congress had no power to enforce laws. So laws coming out of the Articles Congress were suggestions. Nine states were needed to pass a law. That's great. But 13 states were needed to amend the Articles. It had to be unanimous. All 13 states had to agree to amend the Articles government. You couldn't get 13 states to agree on anything. So, under the Articles, the government is gridlocked. There's no executive. There's no president. It's just a Congress. That's it. It's a unicameral Congress. One house Congress. There's no president, and there's no court system to interpret laws. Government is all about laws and rules. Legislatures make the law. Executives execute the law. The judicial branch judges the law. But it's all about laws. And laws are just rules by how we live. Now, lest you think that people aren't aware of how weak the Articles government is, look no further than 1783 and something called the Newburgh Conspiracy. George Washington's army at the end of the American Revolution. Where did they go? What did they do? Well, they went into headquarters in Newburgh, New York. And they sat there. Well, why were they sitting there? They're waiting for orders. They're also waiting to get paid. These are George Washington's army officers, and they want their paychecks. And guess what? There's no money. So they're not getting paid. So they hatch an idea. They're like, we've got guns. The government doesn't. Why don't we march to Philadelphia, take over the government, and install George Washington as the dictator? Now, you know who hatched that plan? Alexander Hamilton. Install Washington as a dictator. Hamilton is a dangerous man. Washington. God bless Washington. I mean, this is why people deify the man. He's the one who said, "Are you crazy?" He goes before his officers, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he says, "I know I've grown old in your company, but I believe I'm also going deaf and blind as well. I can't believe what I'm seeing and hearing from you people." And Washington rejects this offer out of hand. The man could have been a dictator for life. Could have been. And opted not to be. Giving up power is powerful. Relinquishing power is powerful. The man gives up his presidency after 2 terms. The man could have been reelected for the rest of his natural life, and he chooses not to be. George III, when George III heard that Washington was leaving after 2 terms, George III was heard to say, "Now he's a god." Anybody can take power. It's giving up power that really shows your mettle. I know, it's a lot of notes. Okay? One of the things that the Articles government does get right is figuring out what to do with land out west. First of all, Indians need to be removed from the land. So they got to come up with something for that. And then you've got states battling one another over who controls that western land. Virginia claimed land that New York claimed land that Connecticut claimed, Pennsylvania claimed land, that everybody claimed land. And speculators who went out west drove the price of the land up. There was a real estate bubble. Populations begin to swell past the Appalachian Mountains, in particular, Kentucky and Tennessee. Kentucky is predominantly settled by people from Virginia. Tennessee is predominantly settled by people from North Carolina. You begin to see people moving into disputed areas, what today are Alabama and Mississippi, from Georgia. And so there's a recognition that there needs to be some orderly process for land and creation of states out west. So one of the things that the Articles government gets right is an orderly process for creating states. How do we divvy up this land? How can we make money off of it? How can we create an orderly process for creating states? Now, they were debating this for a couple of years. In 1784, Thomas Jefferson came forward with a proposal. Thomas Jefferson being a representative for Virginia at the time, before he was elected. No, he was governor during the Revolution. He was governor during the Revolution. That's right, because the British came calling on his home, and he managed to magically scurry away. But now, in 1784, he's a representative for Virginia, and he puts forward a plan. Take a look at this plan, by the way. It's hysterical. This was the plan. See all this land out west here? Virginia claims it, New York claims it, Massachusetts claims it, Connecticut claims it, everybody claims it. That was the sticking point to getting the Articles government ratified. Once they made a decision that the land out west would be under the national government's control, then the Articles government gets ratified. But then what do you do with that land? Jefferson proposes creating all these states. Look at the names of these states. Sylvania, Michigania, Metropotamia, Assanisipia, Chersonesus? Chersonesus? Where are you from? Chersonesus. Ooh, a state of Washington. How original. Saratoga, Illinois, Polypotamia, Pelissippia. I know. Jefferson had a Jones for all things Greek. And these are Greek names. This was rejected. In case you didn't know. But what the Articles government did do was figure out a way to take all this land and sell it for the benefit of the national government. It's called the Land Ordinance of 1785. And what it does is it takes the land and divides it into even squares. As a matter of fact, let me show you the next slide here. There you go. So, for instance, we're going to take a chunk of land here, blow it up. You take that land and you divide it into ranges. Then you take those ranges and you divide them into squares, and you create a grid. And within each grid are townships. Okay? These townships are all, depending on geography, 36 square miles in size. So there are 36 square miles in a township. You take a square mile and you can sell an entire square mile, which is 640 acres. Or you can sell it in a half section, 320. Or you can sell it in a quarter section of 160. Or you can sell a half a quarter of 80 acres. Or a quarter section of 40 acres. But you can take this land and divide it into even parcels to be sold in an orderly fashion, with all of the profits going to the national government in Philadelphia. That's how the government's going to start to make money, is by land sales. And people could buy that land up, and then they could turn around and flip it and sell it, because they know that there's demand for Western land. They know people want to move out there. So people run in with their money and they buy up all this land. They hold on to it, wait for the value to go up, and then they sell it for a profit. And that's how a lot of people made land. It's called land speculation. I mean, don't people do home speculation? Don't they buy homes, fix them up, and flip them for a profit? Well, it's the same thing. That's speculation. You're guessing. You're guessing that the price is going to go up, not down. Sucks when you buy a piece of real estate and the value goes down. And you're upside down on your real estate. So that's what they're doing here. Okay? That's the land ordinance. And as a matter of fact, if you fly, has anybody ever flown over these states and looked out the window? Everything is a square. Well, there's a reason for that. It goes back to 1785. The Northwest Ordinance then says, okay, once people move out there, how do they become states? And it's real simple. 60,000 people plus a constitution, iggity, aggity, ook, you're a state. That's it. When the Constitution is ratified in 1789, the Northwest Ordinance is rolled over from the Articles government into the Constitution. So today, if you want to create a state, all you need are 60,000 people and a Constitution. Done. And you're an equal state with everybody else. Yeah. Yes. Puerto Rico is not a state. They debate that every 10 years or so. Yes, tomorrow, if they want to debate. If they were a state, they'd have to pay income taxes. As it stands now, since they're a territory, they don't have to pay income taxes. But they get the benefits of being American citizens, so they get the best of all worlds. No, it's a state. You can't secede from the Union. Lincoln said so. Now, the other thing that's in the Northwest Ordinance, and this is something for down the road to be thinking about down the road, is that slavery is banned in the Northwest Territory. So by Northwest, the Ohio River is the dividing line. Remember, this is the western boundary of the United States right here. So in 1787, this is the Northwest. Now, by banning slavery in the Northwest, what have you done? Look at what you've done. You've separated the North from the South.
The slaves are all going to go to try to get up there.
Slaves are going to start to begin to try to move north. You're going to start to have slave rebellions and slave escaping and all that other good stuff. That's right. And you start to have a division in America over where you can and can't take slaves. And the question is always asked, can I take the slaves there? So if you're moving out west and you move here, can I take the slaves there? No. Can I take the slaves there? Yeah. Can I take the slaves there? No. Can I take the slaves there? Yeah. Can I take the slaves there? No. Can I take the slaves there? Can I take the slaves there? No. I wouldn't want to. See, that becomes a question mark. And that's the Missouri controversy of 1821. Because it's been defined up until you get to the Mississippi River, but when you cross the Mississippi River, bets are off. And then you start to have constant debates as we acquire more land out west. Take the slaves there, take the slaves there, take the slaves there, take the slaves there. You're telling me I can't take the slaves where I want to? They're my property. You're infringing on my rights. Nadia.
What was the purpose of
Well, the purpose of banning slavery, they wanted to ban slavery west of the Appalachian Mountains, but before this law was passed, too many people had already moved into Kentucky and Tennessee, so slavery was kind of a fait accompli. It's already there. So rather than try to rustle everybody's feathers here, they just banned it where it was, it wasn't economically viable here, it wasn't economically viable here. And if you look at migration patterns in America, people generally tended to move east to west. So people who settled in Ohio came from New York and Massachusetts. People who settled in Kentucky came from Virginia. People who settled in Tennessee came from North Carolina. People who settled in Mississippi and Alabama came from Georgia and South Carolina. So they brought their culture and their traditions and their values with them.
So
yeah,
there are people just kind of like inching into Spanish Louisiana.
There are people inching into Spanish Louisiana. Yes, absolutely. Yes. All right. So, just to carry this political thing out to its fullest extent. Shays Rebellion. Guys, don't write all this down. Okay? Don't write all this down. Shays Rebellion in 1786. This is what you need to know. These are farmers in western Massachusetts who are upset by the taxes that they're having to pay and the fact that banks are foreclosing on their farms. And they rise up and they fight back against the banks and they take the court system out in western Massachusetts basically hostage. And it requires the governor of Massachusetts, the strong executive governor, to raise the Massachusetts militia to go out west to western Massachusetts, out to the Berkshires, and stop this rebellion. What it highlights is this potential for anarchy and threats to the propertied and moneyed classes. Rich people see danger here. And they want stability. They want order. They're not interested in whether Daniel Shays thinks of himself as a modern-day George Washington. Rich, wealthy elites want order. And they're not going to get order under the Articles government. Some people call it the spirit of revolution. Some people say it's mobocracy. It's the mob run amok. This is George, and this will give you an indication as to where we're going. George Washington's reaction to Shays' rebellion. Good God! We are far gone in everything that is ignoble and bad. Or, I am mortified beyond expression when I view the clouds that have spread over the brightest morn that ever dawned in any country. What a triumph for the advocates of despotism to find that we are incapable of governing ourselves. We need order. Of course, Thomas Jefferson says a little rebellion now and then is a good thing. It's a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. God forbid we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. Thomas Jefferson was nuts. You can't have rebellions every 20 years. Who in the world is going to invest in a country where there are rebellions every 20 years? Do you ever wonder why you're not opening a McDonald's franchise in downtown Baghdad? If you want prosperity, if you want investment, if you want people to make money, people are only going to invest their money if there is stability and predictability in government. Right now, you don't have stability and predictability. And what are the investors doing? Sitting on their hands. They're not investing. They're not expanding. They're not hiring more people. The economy today is kind of inching along because the government can't seem to get out of its own way. It's too unstable. It's unpredictable. When people have millions of dollars that they want to invest, they want it to be predictable. They want to know that they're going to make money off that investment. And right here, Shays' rebellion, people are not going to invest in this country. So the rich, wealthy elites decide that something needs to be done. And they call a meeting. And you know where they meet? Annapolis. They meet in Annapolis in 1786, the same year as Shays' rebellion. So that'll tell you how panicked they are. Shays' rebellion occurs, and bam, a meeting is called. Which in the days of horses and carriages, that's quick. But only 6 states show up. So the guy who called the meeting, Hamilton, says, all right, let's agree to meet next year in Philly to amend the Articles government. So in 1787, these elites meet in Philadelphia to amend the Articles government. National authority to galvanize the nation. Hamilton sees the potential for economic empire, but in order to have economic prosperity, you need social order. Hamilton says the masses seldom judge or determine right. Hamilton is also heard to have said, if men were angels, there would be no need for government. Hamilton's a glass half empty kind of guy. He sees the bad in people. Did you guys do Hobbes and Locke last year? Hobbes, Leviathan, and Locke, social contract? Okay. Hamilton's a Hobbesian. He believes that there needs to be strong government to control people because people normally do the bad or the wrong thing. Huh?
The freedom of people probably would have worked better if people weren't stupid.
Exactly.
Good morning, Seven. Today is Friday.
Hey guys,
The meeting. Please stand for your pledge of allegiance.
stand up with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
Flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Guys, we are not done.
The PSAT
Your test will
scholarship
not be
program
next
is
class.
more than a one-day competition.
Okay?
All test participants
So
can be tested
it will have to be next Thursday. I know that's pep rally day, but it'll have to be next Thursday.
Absolutely free.
All right?
Only available.
Yeah. The top 10, hold on to that, okay?
Mark your calendars now and come take this valuable step